Environmental Advisory Council meeting for Thursday, July 18th. Roll call. Janet Cravanis.
Here.
Cindy Mahalo. Here. Bill Tinto. Here. Sheila O'Sullivan Feeney. Here. Dave Galush. Dave is unable to join us this evening. Okay. And we're going to start off with a moment of silence and pledge of allegiance, especially in the week that we've had. Let's pray for peace and unity in America. Pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, agenda items. Consider approving the agenda as presented. A motion was made by Joe Pinto to approve the agenda, seconded by Janet Cravanis. All in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye. Motion accepted. All right. Item, public comments for agenda items only. Being none, we will move to item number 6, minutes. Consider approving the minutes from our June 20th meeting. Motion was made by Joe Pinto, seconded by Cindy Mahalo. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion stand. All right, wonderful. Item number 7, presentation. I'm going to turn this over to Janet and she will give us the details. Thank you, Janet.
All right, thank you. We're very pleased tonight to have Wilistown Conservation Trust here with us with the history of land protection and the benefits of conservation easements presented by Erik Hetzel, Director of Land Protection and Public Grants, and Gretchen Groebel, Director of Community Engagement. Gretchen and I have worked on a number of projects with Birdtown, and we've had an opportunity to visit her at the Radnor Conservancy, as well as now with Wilistown Conservation Trust. So she serves as the Director of Community Engagement for Wilistown Conservation Trust, and she joined the team in December of 2023. Her role involves public programming, fundraising events, annual fund efforts, corporate partnerships, and community building. Gretchen recently served as Radnor's Conservancy Executive Director for the last 9 years, where she established strong community relationships through educational programming, volunteer opportunities, and fostered beloved native tree giveaway program. She also enjoys being a tree tender, as are several of us, or maybe all of us, and spends time increasing local tree canopy with native trees and acting as a resource for shade tree commissions and environmental advisory councils interested in starting tree giveaway programs. So we know who to tap when we need more information. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Gretchen, for you to introduce Erik.
Thank you for having us. You want me to start over?
Please.
Okay. Thank you for having us tonight. I'm here with my colleague, Erik Hetzel. He began working for the trust in 2014, and he has brought with him over 25 years of experience, of planning experience, working in both public and private organizations. He is our Director of Land Protection and Public Grants, and he handles the development and execution of private conservation easements held by the trust. Also, the acquisition of public lands to add to our nature preserves and grant funding to support these land conservation projects. I'll also put in a very fun plug for Erik. I don't know if you have heard about his Hetzel Brothers band, but he has navigated quite a few events around the area. So, and he also loves spending time in the outdoors with his family. So thank you, Erik.
All right, thank you, Gretchen. As Gretchen mentioned, my role at the trust is I'm Director of Land Protection and Public Grants. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about the origins of our organization, how we've grown over the years and where we're going, and then open it up for questions. Wasn't really sure what would be the best thing to present, so I think some background on our organization would be useful, and then how we've where we're going here. So just to start out, this first slide, the modern history of land conservation under the auspices of the trust spans over 40 years, but really it's based in a conservation ethic that goes back many years before that. It's a story of generations of people caring deeply for the land with a passion for protecting it, and not just for open space, but to preserve the rich natural resources of our woodlands, rolling fields, stream valleys, and all of that, just to benefit wildlife and to welcome and share with people of all ages and backgrounds, to try to build a deep connection with nature. So it's also a story that couldn't have happened without loyal support, both moral and financial, of so many people over those years, for which we at the Trust are eternally grateful. This slide shows our geographic program area. Our area is an oasis of interconnected open spaces that has at its core an area originally known as Radnor Hunt Country. Today, our area is defined by the headwaters of three important creeks in the southeastern Pennsylvania region: the Ridley, the Crum, and the Darby Creeks. Our program area encompasses all of Wilistown Township, parts of East Goshen Township, Easttown Township in Chester County, and portions of Newtown and Edgemont Townships in Delaware County. And overall, it's an area that totals about 28,000 acres, or almost 44 square miles in area. So our 40-year history at Wilistown Conservation Trust can really be viewed as four important segments, and we're beginning what I would say the fifth era now of Wilistown Conservation Trust. The first era is the early years that were under the umbrella of the Brandywine Conservancy back in the early 1980s. This slide here, in the very beginning, what you're looking at, Wilistown Conservation Trust was really the vision of our now retired executive director, Bonnie Van Allen, who's shown on the right of that slide, along with her friend and colleague, Kathy McCoy, on the left. And what they were trying to do was apply the principles of land conservation that were being used in the Brandywine Conservancy at the time, which was then under the leadership of the iconic Chester County conservationist, Frolic Weymouth, who was integral in the formation of the Brandywine Conservancy back then, and the Museum of Art, and that whole organization. So they were working to apply those principles to lands in the Wilistown area where they were living at the time. Soon afterwards, in 1985, Alice Hausman joined the effort, and she's been integral to our success in the years ever since then. Her partnership with Bonnie, their neighbors and friends, they've really been integral, just pushing the interests of the trust over the many years. So the second segment of our history is marked by the official formation of Wilistown Conservation Trust as its own independent entity in 1996. As I mentioned, it started as a satellite operation of the Brandywine Conservancy in the 1980s. By 1996, with the blessing of the Conservancy, Wilistown became its own independent organization, 1996. So what you're looking here is our very first board meeting in 96. At that time, WCT occupied the old blacksmith shop that's located at White Horse Corner at the corner of Goshen and Providence Roads. You're probably all familiar with that corner. It's sort of an iconic corner. This is a painting of that corner looking west on Goshen Road at Providence. Soon after we were in the blacksmith shop, the organization moved across the street to the, I think it was the saddle shop, the white building that's across the street. And then after several years there, as we grew, we moved into our current office, which is a farmhouse at 925 Providence Road, which is just south of Whitehorse Corner. Now, this brings us to the third segment of our history, which was a period of vigorous growth in our land protection efforts throughout the early 2000s. We added land protection and land stewardship staff, along with other support positions. I'm going to show you now just a little bit of the progress that was made in those years. Beginning in 1979, the green areas, the outline shows our program area, which, as I mentioned, was the headwater areas of the Ridley, Crum, and Darby Creeks. The green blotches there are protected lands. And you can see in 1979, the biggest holding of protected land was Ridley Creek State Park and some other protected areas up in the northern part of our program area. By 1989, the Brandywine Conservancy under Bonnie and Kathy's leadership had begun to really start to conserve larger pieces of land. By 1999, you're seeing more pieces being added. And by 2009, which is, I'm going to start talking about the next era in our history, even more has been added. So it was also during this time that we were acquiring lands outright. We weren't just accepting conservation easement donations, but we were raising money to purchase land for preserves that we now own today. Our first three preserves were Ashbridge Preserve, Rushton Woods Farm and Preserve, and Kirkwood Preserve. So it was this solid foundation of protected lands that really set the stage for the current era in the history of the trust. Now this period that we're in now has really seen an evolution of a robust outreach and research program, starting with the creation of Rushton Farm in 2008. That was located at Rushton Woods Preserve on Delchester Road. If you're familiar with that, down near Okahocking. So under the direction of our farmer, Fred DeLong, seen here in this picture, the farm occupies 6 acres of tillable land at the preserve, Rushton Preserve. It's a community magnet. We have a community supported agricultural operation at its core. The food that's produced at the farm is enjoyed by CSA members. We have over 150 families that are members of that CSA who support the operation financially. And many people are also involved in volunteering at the farm. We also, during the growing season, Fred takes truckloads of food to the West Chester food cupboard. That's what you're seeing him doing here. I think last year we had how many tons of food? I think thousands of pounds of food got donated that in addition to what was consumed by the CSA members. So just a few more pictures of the farm. So underpinning all of this, we use the farm as an agroecology laboratory, and it's a demonstration platform for innovating and testing sustainable agricultural practices. We don't use any chemicals. You might liken it to organic farming in that, you know, there's no chemicals being used, but it's more than that. It's as I mentioned, it's really like a laboratory where people come and study the flora and fauna that work in synergy with the growing operations at the farm. You know, the number fails me, but there's something like over 100 species of bees that have been cataloged alone at the farm. So because we don't use any chemicals, we rely on pollinators, and pollinators thrive in that environment. So the next sort of program area, or I'm sorry, the next functional area that I'm going to talk about here that has grown out of the land protection is our bird research program. So Lisa Kijak, who's shown here on the screen holding the owl, leads that program, which began as a banding station that's really evolved into a full-blown research operation. We have global reach with our MODIS tracking operations, where we track the movements of birds all up and down the East Coast from Canada to the Caribbean using this MODIS tracking program. And it feeds databases all over the country for bird researchers to access the migratory patterns of birds, which is really pretty amazing that this little land trust now has a global reach. We share this data about bird health, migration patterns, and it underlies the importance of habitat preservation, because these birds stop off at Rushton Farm, where the banding station is, on their way during the migratory pathway, seasonally in the fall and in the spring, because it represents a habitat that is healthy for them. They fuel up on their way on their long journey in the spring and the fall. Just a couple more pictures of the bird program. Next up is our watershed program. This is one of our newer programs, started around 2016, 2017. Director Lauren McGrath, shown on the left in the straw hat in the stream, showing the kids macroinvertebrates there. She studies the health of the watersheds, the Ridley, Crum, and Darby Creeks. So the information that's gathered there on the flora, fauna, and hydrologic conditions of the creeks is sent to shared regional databases to help paint a bigger picture about the health of our waterways. Being the headwater areas of these streams, they're the most important portions. It's the first water that lands in the stream that then runs downstream to people who use it for drinking water. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about our Rushton Conservation Center. That building in the distance was completed in 2018 on Rushton Woods Farm and Preserve, at the location of the farm. And the building is designed to host educational events, seminars, community gatherings, and farm-to-table dinners, all centered on themes that are connected to our land protection vision. So the purpose of this is really to, as I said, extend our community reach even further, invite people in. These images are showing some of the farm-to-table type things that demonstrate how the food from the farm can be used in food preparation. And then it gets to be enjoyed by people who are interested in our mission. So in 2021, Bonnie Van Allen retired and passed the torch to our current president and executive director, Kate Etherington. Kate's a lifelong resident of our community and combines her passion for land protection with a master's degree in nonprofit management to lead WCT into a new era of conservation. Kate started out as a volunteer at WCT. Then she became a member of our board of trustees as one of the youngest members of the board. Then she became our assistant executive director before assuming the leadership role of our growing organization. And we're all really happy to have her there. She's a great visionary and was really handpicked by Bonnie and the founders to carry on their vision. So this slide really brings us back to our central focus, which is protecting land. The growth of our organization, the expansion of our special programs hasn't changed that core mission of land protection. So I'm just going to go through again the succession of land protection between 1979 and today. And we've identified other areas within our core area that we would like to target for conservation, whether through conservation easement or acquisition, or just voluntary landowner conservation activities. It's basically my job to try to turn those properties green in the coming years, or find ways to set the organization up to make that happen. So that's really just the background, our origins, and where we're going. You may have seen that we recently acquired 90 acres on on Providence Road, right across from our offices. That's going to become our new Kestrel Hill Preserve. We're working on programming for that now, planning a parking area that will allow public access and trails throughout the entire preserve. It's a really magnificent piece of ground. Has all sorts of habitat types, from rolling hillsides to riparian areas, streams running through it. There's a woodland and some important grasslands that we hope to cultivate for Greenland nesting birds population. So, if you have any questions or would like me to expand on some things, I'm happy to.
How do you determine what land to target for acquisition or expansion, or as identified by the pink?
We use geographic information systems mapping to overlay layers of information, everything from sensitive environmental information, dimensional information, topographic information, and we've actually gone through and ranked properties according to the presence of those environmentally sensitive features. Also, size of properties, proximity to other protected lands is considered. It's kind of quantitative, but also kind of qualitative. It's you can, when you're in the business of protecting land, there's a lot of factors to look at. You can't just strictly use numbers to do it. You need to sort of look at the overall context and policy context, zoning, land use, all that kind of stuff that goes into it. So it's really just a guide for us so that we can be aware of lands that are out there that we think fit the criteria for conservation. And then we, either proactively engage landowners or just become aware when those properties look like they might become available for development or for other changes that could occur. And then we try to, become part of that process.
Eric, if you have a property in these areas in Newtown Square, let's say, what would a resident do to kind of be interested into this? Would they contact you, or are they talk Gretchen, and walk us through the simple starts of the process? Because a lot of times people understand easement as you coming in, taking control of the property, but they don't understand that you could allow the property stay intact by the owner, but just convert it to a conservation effort.
That's right. It's an entirely voluntary process. They come to us with a vision, and we help them to define that vision. And if we believe that what they want to do is worthy from a conservation standpoint, we'll agree to accept a donation of an easement on that property. Now, they retain complete ownership of the land. They retain certain rights that is explicitly defined in the easement document that we write with them. And then they cede certain rights to us as the easement holder that are outlined in that document. So it's really up to the landowner how much or how little they want to conserve. And then it's up to us if we decide that the conservation vision is worth it from our priority standpoint, then we'll accept the donation of the easement.
So if the property had a wetland or was adjacent to a wetland, you could have just a portion of your property be under the easement, not necessarily your entire property.
That's correct. And then we'll define special protection areas, whether they be woodlands or riparian areas around a stream, or other attributes that might exist. They'll be defined, they'll be mapped, so you know the boundaries of it. And then what you are allowed to do in those areas will be specifically defined in the easement as well. So it might designate a woodland area and say that you can't take any trees down except for diseased and dying trees. Or it might say that you can clear a space for a trail or clear a space for building a new house. and it would define that, where that would be. It also might note, that there are certain non-native species that should be eradicated or replaced if they were to come down.
Any other questions? I have a couple more, but I don't.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a couple questions. Are any of the pink locations from that map in Newtown Township?
I think there probably are some. It's, it's really conceptual. I think, for instance, we identify large properties. So I could think in our program area, certain institutional properties, like up near Malvern, you've got Malvern Prep and the Phelps School. What's the likelihood they'll ever go, into conservation? But it could happen. I think in Newtown, there's Garrett Williamson Foundation is probably one that we've identified as, what would happen in 25 years if they decided they weren't going to operate there anymore. It just gives us it's sort of a placeholder to know that these things exist.
And my second question is, when you're in dialogue with the landowner about the disposition of their property, to what extent does the municipality or the township or the government get involved? I mean, asking, as we're part of the township government.
So the municipal government doesn't really get involved at all. It's a private engagement between the landowner and us as a private nonprofit land trust. When you're talking from a conservation easement perspective, that's a little bit different when we're talking about acquisitions of land by us, for instance, with our preserves. We work in partnership primarily right now with Wilistown Township, because that township has an open space fund that is dedicated to land acquisition projects. And that's funded by a portion of the earned income tax that they levy. I think it's 1/8% goes into the open space fund, of the overall levy. And that is dedicated to land acquisition, whether it's the township acquiring land or providing it to us in some cases, to acquire property. So usually we use that as a match for other public funds. We also apply for funding for land acquisitions from the state, the DCNR. Also, Chester County has a very robust and well-funded open space funding program in the Preservation Partnership Program in Chester County. So those are, two really important public sources that, in addition, we use to the Wilistown Township use of funds, which may or may not come to bear on our acquisition projects. But if it's important to the township, they'll work as a partner with us on those.
Do you work with individual properties and HOAs?
We haven't really worked with HOAs from a land acquisition or conservation standpoint, but we're beginning to do more. Our stewardship department. So I'm the land protection department. I work with landowners to get properties into conservation. We have a separate stewardship department whose job it is to then monitor those easements every year and deal with if there's ever any violations of the easement. They work to fix that with the landowner. But we're also getting more into the stewardship department's getting a bit more into assisting landowners with the management of their land. And that could mean meadow restoration. We do have a meadow restoration grant program that we work with the state that we're administering to turn 50 acres across our program area into native grassland meadows. And I know they are working with some HOAs to do that. HOAs that aren't otherwise affiliated with us. We don't have any easements or other real estate interests there, but they're turning to us, applying for grants to do restoration of some of the manicured mown areas into naturalized native meadows.
That West Chester,
West Chester
If
Borough.
if I can,
Borough.
if you're gonna talk, if I have you go up to this microphone,
Join
please.
you.
Yeah.
I believe that West Chester Borough is also a part of this very exciting lawn to meadow conversion program that we received a $250,000 grant.
Yep.
So it's exciting because if you think about all of the lawn that your public works guys, the time, the noise, the gas pollution, and just, you know, the money that's associated with mowing. It's so exciting. And we've had a lot of interest from HOAs, and we are working with West
I think-
Chester.
Yeah, Inverary and Radnor is doing it. So yeah, there's other,
And I know that Lissitor is very excited about the idea of applying for our next round of this lawn conversion program.
Yep.
Thank you.
very good.
Eric, I have another question. On this 1/8% of the, you said that's from the earned income tax. Well, how much is that per year roughly? Do you have an idea of the dollar figure?
it's roughly 800,000 to $1 million a year is what the budget is that is levied.
Okay, thank you.
And it's, and there's debt service, there's a bond associated with that as well, so there's some debt service that goes to pay for. I think currently Wilistown Township has something like $3.3 million in that fund that's available for projects. You know, that they could spend. I think the fund has a total of over $5 million in it right now, but some of that's dedicated to servicing the debt.
I have a question. If you were at home right now watching this and you had a property, what would be the benefit to you as a homeowner to considering your property for an easement with Wilistown Conservation?
There are a couple ways, a couple of benefits that you can consider. First of all, just the conservation benefit. If you're a conservationist and you want to make a difference, in terms of, you know, natural land protection, that's sort of the initial thing. And those are the people that we really want to work with. Ancillary to that, but as an incentive to that, depending on the circumstances of your easement, you may be eligible for a tax, an income tax benefit, deduction. That's the federal earned income tax. So, the rights that you give up, are worth something. They typically can be worth something. So let's say you have a 20-acre property and it's zoned for 1 acre zoning. And if you do all your net outs, you decide, you see that you can develop, you know, let's say 15 home sites on that 20 acres. If you decide that you're going to give up 10 of those home sites and retain 5, those 10 home sites have value. And the value of that is established by an appraiser who does a conservation appraisal on the property. And they look at that from the standpoint of what's the value of that property before the easement and what's the value of the property after the easement. And that difference represents the value of the gift or donation to the trust, that you can then go to the IRS and say, you know, your tax bracket is applied to that value, and you can take a deduction on your earned income tax, your federal taxes, up to 50% of your adjusted gross income in the first year, and then up to 50% of your adjusted gross income for the next 15 years. So for a total of 16 years, you can spread that deduction out. So that's a big incentive for people who have enough land where they're giving up value, and who have the earned income to benefit from a deduction.
And more importantly, like you said, they have a generous spirit to be important to take care of conservation of our land. So it's not just about the tax benefit, but it's more important to think of the land, and especially because there is so much limited land in this area. Janet, did you have any questions?
No, but I think it's a wonderful presentation. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
Especially that this is just the beginning of this conversation. that we can continue in the future.
Yes, we look forward to working with you in every possible way. We'd love to spread the information and knowledge out there. I was at your preserve on Sunday. The drive-by is just glorious. I mean, for anyone, this is peak viewing season. So if anyone has the time, go out to your properties and enjoy them. Enjoy what you've done with the lawn conversion programs. It's just the glorious flowers, just like the birds, the butter, everything was out there. It was
So
beautiful.
this week is Wildflower Week, and if you sign up to go out for a walk, which is free, but they will send you a online the little brochure of the flowers that are there.
And you have that information we could share out, or
I do have that information.
that'd be great.
Eric,
Any questions?
I have one last question. What would constitute an easement violation?
Anything that goes against the terms that are defined in the easement, for instance,
So what's the problem?
for instance, you may define a woodland where you say you can't remove trees unless they're diseased or dying. You go and you clear cut it, that's a violation. Or in some cases, we'll define areas on a property that are considered scenic view areas. See, when you take a tax deduction through the IRS on this, there's a four-pronged test that you need to meet. At least three of those tests. One of them is, I think, that the easement protects scenic and historic cultural features. One is that it protects sensitive natural features. Another one involves allowing public access. That's a very important one through, for instance, a trail easement. And in order to achieve all those protections, we may, for instance, the scenic attributes, we may define a scenic view area or a restricted building area where you're not allowed to do anything except maybe put a utility facility, like if you have, a water line to get to the house, it can go through that, but it's not an above ground improvement, or maybe a fence that fences in a portion of that yard. Say somebody comes in with a driveway, or they build a house in that area, that would constitute a violation. Oftentimes we'll also have limitations on the size of structures that you can build. Again, that's entirely up to the landowner to decide. They'll agree to that. And if they were to come in and build something that was not in keeping with those specific terms, that would be a violation.
Well, thank you very much for coming out tonight. We really appreciate your information. We look forward to working together with you. And I'm sure, Steve, anything you would like to add to that? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, item number 8.1, 4019 West Chester Pike, Newtown Square. And we did receive the engineer's letter on that property. Cindy, you have the final comment letter that you're working on for that. Any information that you want to talk about regarding before we go into the final comment letter? Joe, you weren't here last month when we discussed 4019.
Yep.
It will go before the planning commission next week. And so Cindy has the final comments, and you saw the engineering report. Cindy, what do you have on that?
You mean, what do I have?
And the engineer's reports. What did you find? Anything interesting in that, or?
Well, I thought he raised a lot of points. He mentioned a lot of deficiencies or information that was missing in the plans dated May 15th. And I wondered when and if
Tim, that should be under the 409, the preliminary final review. That is the engineer's letter. Dated 6/27. The second, there you go.
my question. So Steve, my question was that in the engineer's letter dated June 27th, they pointed out a lot of information that was missing and that they requested. And I wondered when we might see that. Is there a chance that the EAC would see that before we write our updated comment letter?
I really don't know the answer. I don't know if what I don't know is, will they completely go through the planning commission at the first meeting with it. I mean, it's rare that they go through with just one meeting. So I would think you would probably see it again. But if they went through it in just one meeting, then potentially it would be before the board. I don't know how the month falls in that where they would take it up and before the Board of Supervisors.
So it's possible that the planning commission that meets next week, and this is on their agenda, that they could consider this and make a decision even with the fact that the engineer's letter says lots of things are missing.
Well, no, what I'm saying is, I don't know what the developer may respond to all the engineers' comments between now and next week. That's what I don't know. That's why I'm saying, that's why I'm like, if the developer by next week, when we go to planning commission, has answered all of that, then the planning commission may have all the answers that it needs to do its review.
And would those answers be in writing or would they have been in conversation?
Well, I think some of them are actually would be on the plans.
So therefore, there might be updated plans.
There might be updated plans, but they wouldn't, my point is, I think what you asked me, and maybe I misunderstood, I thought you were asking me, would it be before the planning commission committed and did its part? What I'm saying is, they might submit a set of updated plans next week. You wouldn't see it. The planning commission would see it and would make it, maybe I misunderstood what you were asking. If I did, I apologize.
No, that's okay.
I
No.
think a lot of our comments that we discussed last month still are holding true.
Yeah.
And Erik brought up some very interesting points, which I thought were
Yeah.
very helpful. One thing I did not see anywhere in his letter was that back area that we discussed. Remember that corner? There's a triangle property that's outside. It's in the residential zone, not in the commercial zone of property. And we wanted to make sure, and Cindy, you were going to put in the language to hold that into perpetuity, to make sure that that triangle, first of all, gets landscape plans, and second of all, becomes permanent green space or protected space and not moved in, because the applicant owns both side properties is what we were concerned about. You might not remember the details.
No, I do remember the detail. I'm
And he put in wording, we basically agreed to all the wording, we were just kind of keeping it open in case we had additional information. So other
Yeah.
than the engineer's report, is there anything that we should be adding to the comment letter that we already agreed to last month?
I don't know. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add?
My only concern was that back area, because it was not noted in the engineer's report.
Okay.
And I thought the engineer brought up a great point, because he was asking about the sidewalk, which was in the original plans, it's not noted. And those trees that are noted in both the Ferrari plans and in this particular plans are still not there, even though they're shown to be existing. And I was concerned about that. We did also ask for that front area to be heavily with evergreens, just to provide, even though we were mentioning those 9 spots, that was something that we thought was really important. Anything else? So that you'll be able to finalize that letter?
Yeah, and since they're meeting next Thursday, I guess I should finish it by tomorrow to get it out to everybody.
Yeah, just remember, your letter is going to go primarily to the Board of Supervisors. I mean, that's who your letter's to. You know, your concerns can go before the Planning Commission, but the focus will be when the Board of Supervisors does their piece.
Well, we would like to comply with planning commission to make sure it's on their agenda so they can understand what our concerns are.
Sure.
Because supervisors might not see this till the middle of August. And
Right.
I understood the applicant put in preliminary final, so they're expecting to, when they go before planning, they were hoping to have it done in one go, but
Well, preliminary final, what that means is, so when you do a set of plans, we have a process that you come in, you do a preliminary land development plan. I mean, we haven't had anybody that's done that since I've been here. They all ask for the waiver of the preliminary final. But the preliminary would go through and you would go through one time and do everything. And then when you've gone back and done redesign and all of that, then you would come back in and you would do a final plan. I think in my entire 10 years here, I don't know that anybody has ever done that. I think everybody has asked for the waiver. And I think every time that's happened, they've been granted that. What I will say is that doesn't mean it won't be before planning 2 or 3 times
Right.
for review prior to going to the board. So I mean, I don't want you to think that the preliminary final means it has to be a rush. It just means that instead of coming in with a preliminary plan that they get, actually, I do have one that did it. I just thought about it. Garrett Williamson came in with a preliminary plan, and they didn't take it very far. They actually didn't follow all the way through, but they started with a preliminary plan for their childcare center that they wanted to build. That was a preliminary. That was not a preliminary final. That was just trying to get feedback before they did the final design and do that. But I do believe Garrett Williamson did that.
So we already made a motion to,
Yeah.
Are you,
do you want to,
uh,
we don't need.
We
to-
don't need
is your mic on?
Yeah,
We're
we
not
don't need
picking
to
it.
make another
No.
motion because we already made a motion for the comment letter with all of the points that were noted. There's no new information, but I think it's important that we get our letter out tomorrow so that it will be on planning. And then if it goes before the supervisors next month, we can always take a third look at it. But I think it's
Okay.
important to get that out there.
Yep.
Okay, we don't need a motion on that? All right, perfect. All right, a new business. This was discussing a rough estimate of what EAC members will be planning to attend the October 5th EAC Fall Gathering from WeConservePA at Temple University. What's nice is we are affiliated membership, so we will pay a reduced fee for that. And I would like, if you could let me know by next month who will be attending so that we can have Mara Kennedy do our registration for us. And it will be an all-day event in person at the Temple University Ambler Campus. It's always a great presentation, a great fact finding. And if we can carpool up, that would be even better. All right, item 9.2, discussion and possible action regarding a collaboration strategy with other organizations for the 2025 EAC public education programs for free communication. Cindy, what are your thoughts on that?
I didn't really understand.
You
what
wrote
this-
that. This was your idea that you wanted us to basically have a conversation about coordinating when we were looking at educational programs, instead of us always having to reinvent the wheel ourselves, to coordinate with other organizations like Wilistown Conservation.
Okay, yeah, this was more a philosophical approach rather than a specific activity. I think that in the past year, we've seen that we can spend a lot of time and effort planning events that get a low turnout, or we have to cancel at the last minute, and we don't have the bandwidth for that. And I've just been struck over the last year by the number of fabulous community events that are offered by so many other organizations here, whether it's Wilistown Conservation Trust, or I just circulated something this afternoon that Penn State is offering a multi-webinar series on, caring for your backyard stream. I would like to propose that we are more aggressive and proactive in staying in touch with these other organizations to find out what events they're planning and promote them. Now, I don't know if the township's going to have problems with that, but if Haverford, every spring, Haverford has a fabulous rain garden workshop. It's all Saturday morning. Why should we reinvent the wheel? Why can't we just cross-publicize it and direct people there, So that's kind of my approach, is that as we plan, we want to do more community education. But granted the fact that we're understaffed, we're down 2 members,
Yes.
it seems like that would make sense.
I think what we could look to do is maybe individuals see who we partner, like Janet, you could be the contact person for Wilistown Conservation, and Cindy, we can choose organizations that we can work with to make sure that we're getting out front and center. And like you said, why reinvent the wheel? Let's bring in the resources for classes, as long as they're relevant, they work with our community, they're important to the message that we're all sharing. And I'm sure that, we would be discussing each group meeting that we're doing at our township meeting. So I don't.
So would the Board of Supervisors have a problem with that?
I think that if you, let's say you found 3 organizations that, or 5 organizations that you're wanting to look at, I would present those 5 organizations to the board and make sure the board's okay with them. I mean, that's how I would do it. I mean, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't go with Havertown. I mean, that's another municipality. I think where it gets a little bit dicey is when you start doing things that are doing it for profit. And the township's always a little hesitant to say we're supporting this, in that it appears that we're supporting a business, and we're very careful about how we do that.
And, okay, and I'm not proposing we co-plan these. I am not proposing that we become a co-sponsor. I'm just saying,
Yeah,
Just announce it.
announce it, just
Yeah.
spread the word.
yeah, and again, that's what I'm saying. I'm still, I think that's my understanding.
Okay, yes.
I may have said co-sponsor, and if I did, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to, but if we're saying, if we're saying that Newtown Township's EAC and the township is recommending or suggesting people go to Havertown or Haverford's, rain garden event, to me, it may not be a co-sponsor, but we are sanctioning, or we're saying it's a good event to participate in. Again, I just want to run it through the
Yes.
board and make sure that, like, the list is, we just are very careful when it comes to an organization that's a for-profit organization. If all of a sudden, what we don't want to have happen, and what we have to always be careful about, is when you start saying we support this or we support that, then, I mean, because I get tons of stuff
Yeah,
that
no,
people
that's
want
not
us.
what I
support.
have in mind.
Yeah.
You make that very
I
clear.
think you're
last
looking
year.
Wilistown Conservation, DCBA,
yeah.
CRC. I don't think.
So now media has a Eco Fest in September where lots of people come with tables and information.
That's out of
I
transition
learned,
town,
yes, out of transition town, right?
which is
I
a
learned
private
a lot of
organization.
it. I
Yeah.
was there last year with Birdtown. And a lot of contacts also. So, I mean, is that the kind of thing? I mean, there obviously are some things that are sold.
I mean, we can review it. I can look at it. I can see where they stand. We
Right.
make a recommendation to the board to, or not to support, this as a township. Like, I think if it's going to be like in the township newsletter, which is what I'm assuming that like you're looking for, and
maybe just
EAC
a
is,
bulletin board.
or EAC is suggesting people go to
No, I
this, or,
mean a live-
Yeah.
then I think that the board just needs to have a chance to review it before it happens.
I think it's important for us to work together
Either
whenever
way.
possible and making sure that we're always aware of, on target with our message.
I think anything that I heard mentioned here tonight, particularly, I'm not very familiar with the one that Janet, you just mentioned, but the others, I don't think there's any problem. We support all of those organizations
Right.
today. I pretty much.
Great,
Great.
thank you.
All right. Item 9.3, discussion of possible action for the EAC 2025 budget items. So I did send out, these were just ideas we had discussed last month. Joe, you weren't here. We looked at our 2024 budget and we came up with just items under consideration for 2025. And I shared that out with you. One thing I noticed is missing was the Wilistown Conservation. We discussed last month adding $100. Steve, you mentioned 2 things. We were looking to adding the funding for our tree program for next year. But earlier, I think last month, you said that you would be looking to take all the street tree program under shade tree. So is that something we should not be including in our budget?
I think that we would I want to have a place for it.
Okay,
And it's a single budget line item. It's one place.
right.
I don't want to have to go, there's $5,000 out of
I
10
know,
here,
right.
and there's $5,000 out of 6 here. I just want to have one line item. It's the shade tree for that purpose.
But we
Yeah.
would still be working with them in
How,
harmony to if we,
the key is not where it falls in the budget,
Okay.
it's who's responsible, and then.
okay,
that's it.
awesome. Okay, so we could look to remove that, which still brings us down to 7,600. And some things that we mentioned, and Steve, you and I are meeting next week on this, but we're still in the process. We haven't even approved these.
Yeah.
We discussed them and we still are open to any consideration. So if anyone has additional ideas tonight, one of them was the $2,550 was the projected township signage for the waterways. And that was just an estimate. That was $175 for 15 signs. And this was something just Cindy and I were trying to get a target number for a starting point.
Wait,
$775.
can we stop there?
Sure.
To that point, I guess I don't have a copy of it. No, I do. Steve, I was asking Sheila, what the process and the documentation is that's going to be required for the budget requests. I know that you've mentioned a couple times that the board is going to be taking a more strategic look
Mhm.
at these requests, which I thought they did that last year, but you're saying it's going to be more strategic this year. And they're going to be looking to see how each requested item, and this is the verbiage from last year's form, which township strategic plan initiative or objective does the request help accomplish?
Yep.
And how does this help accomplish the township strategic plan? How does this help accomplish the commission, committee, or board goals? So Sheila had asked me to put together an estimate for this stream crossing signage program, which I did, and I used the budget request form from last year and aligned it, showed the alignment with the strategic plan, the comp plan, the MS4 requirements. Is that the type of documentation you want?
Yes.
Okay, do you want that for all the other items? The $775 for training, the $400 for event support, the $600 for signs and flyers, that type of thing.
That is what we're looking for. Yes.
So you want a separate form for each one of those things.
Yeah. It doesn't, I mean, it may not be quite,
I want to know what's expected so we
Yeah.
can deliver.
yeah. No, I don't know that has to be, I mean, like, I saw what you wrote there. It was, look, I mean, the one you held up looked like there was a lot there.
Yeah.
3 pages.
Yeah.
And we were
yeah.
looking, and that was just one.
Yeah,
And we've
yeah.
got
So
14.
I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say that the key is I would tie it back and say it like in the strategic plan, it might be tied back to item number
Yep.
5.
And yeah,
Yeah, and that's what this
Point
does.
That's
That's
okay.
what you're saying.
But you don't necessarily need to type out 5.1 to say it. You're just
Okay.
saying that like this is the general line.
consolidate, because we have like 15, I think there's 12 items on here. We might consolidate, boom,
Yeah,
boom, boom.
4 items
Because-
might,
right.
4 items might all fit together.
And looking at our 2024 budget, we're very similar in what we're looking for 2025. The
Yeah.
only note, we're still doing training, event support, for our Sustainable Green Business Program. That would be our March event. We originally had, last year had expected $1,000. This year, we're looking to $1,500. I did ask Mara last Friday, I wrote to her, asked for what our expenditures were. And I did follow up with her. She said she was going to get back to me. She hasn't. And I know I reached out to her
She's
today.
waiting on me.
Oh, okay. Okay, no worries. I just wanted to make sure where we were and
Yeah, just know that she's waiting on me. She has no way of doing that on her
no
own.
worries. Okay.
And I'm usually have a finance director that does that for me, and I don't have one,
We're
so.
going to continue with the community education. We're going to continue, and all of us EAC members feel really strongly with continuing our WeConservePA affiliated membership for $250. We also feel strongly that because these partners who we work with, Darby Creek, Crum Creek, Birdtown, Wilistown, are all instrumental in delivering programs for us, that we would continue with the $100 donation to them. Although we are saying we're using taxpayer funds money to give a donation, why it's important is they need to show back when they go out to that the communities who are there are benefiting from their programs are behind it. So our donation of $100 is almost minuscule in terms of what their need is, but it's important that we acknowledge their
Mhm.
importance, and especially for Newtown Township's name to be on their list of donors is a very important for our presence in our community. Same thing with Birdtown. We felt that that was really important, that Birdtown does a lot for our community. $200 for EAC members for attendance at Watershed. Again, this is similar to last year. We dropped our leaf mulch from 600 to 500, and we will be pulling out the tree. We'll take that tree out. So we're actually going to be coming close to budget. So
Well, I have a couple.
she's
couple
going to have
things.
some more money. Don't worry,
Yeah,
we'll have some ideas.
A couple things, just for consolidation, I'm wondering, would it make sense? I don't know if this is,
So like, for example, and I'm just gonna help you hopefully, like, if you have education and organizations that you wanna support, you might put all of that together, like you may have 5 educational
Yes.
events that add up to, I don't know, $500. I'm making this up. I don't know what the numbers are. And then you may want to donate to 5 organizations, and that's another $500.
group
Yeah.
those together.
You,
Yeah.
you could put probably all of that together as one. You don't need a separate
Extra.
explanation for
Mhm.
each event, why it's important. You might list it within that sheet, just a one-liner as if there's something new that you're adding that you haven't done before, why that should be added. But if it's something we've been doing, you don't need to keep doing that.
Well, one thing that came to mind, which was really.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
We spoke with outside consultants to kind of get an understanding. A lot of times when, the township engineer or the township, Andy, they always have to look at our codes and what is to code. And Erik can only speak, as to what our codes are. But a lot of times we've had some circumstances where we've had this area that maybe our codes aren't as stringent as what are following best management practices. So we were discussing the idea of the need for an outside consultant, because a lot of times when we go before the planning commission or the zoning, we are not environmental engineers. We don't have the credentials that they're looking for. And a lot of times you need somebody else's letter that gives testimony to a specific issue of what is best management practices. I'll give you the example of, we even had to go before the planning and the zoning commission multiple times to address using a 30-year-old wetlands delineation report. And we were surprised that they would even consider it. Whereas if we had an outside consultant who could give testimony to that effect. So we were looking maybe having a possible consultation fee of, let's say, $2,000. We would never be able to afford to pay a consultant or an expert witness the full amount of which they could, because most of them can get $400 to $500 an hour. But some of the times they will take a courtesy of a $500 letter, a $500 fee. They'll give you a letter, stating to the fact, they put their credentials on the line, they give you the best management practices. And that way it's no longer what Cindy says, or I say, or Janet says, it's an expert witness who can give testimony, especially when we're dealing with hearings. And when I spoke with,
So let me say this, that if you want to do that, I think that's a different type
Yes.
of presentation to the board.
yes,
I think that's asking for them, because ultimately, I think it becomes the board's consultant.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
for example, the arborist ultimately, I didn't say that very well, reports to the board, even though he helps assist the shade tree.
yes.
So if that's what you're looking for, I think you have to present it that way.
Okay.
It's a different,
Right,
It's-
because we're,
it's not necessarily. It would be, you would probably request the board to use the consultant to give you feedback on these areas.
and that's something I think we've talked about, and we've spoken with other EACs and organizations, and it's difficult because at the end of the day, the township can only uphold the laws or the rules that are in the books that you have, and you're bound by those. And also there's other conditions that, you can and can't do certain things.
Right.
Whereas the consultant can provide an independent analysis that might, contradict what the engineer says, so that's why it's a,
Well, but I think that
we're following best management practices.
yeah, I understand. There's a difference though between best management practices and what our ordinance says.
Right.
And we can only hold the developer to our ordinance.
Yes,
Now, that doesn't mean that if we give them a best management practice, that they won't consider it.
yes.
So that's a different thing.
Well, but then there are also a number of times when there is latitude in the ordinance that exceptions can be granted and
Yes.
distances can be shaved or expanded. And there are many times when the applicant asks for more.
Yep.
And more provision is provided in the code, but we're trying to say why that's not a good idea.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Right.
If it's in, but I'm just saying if it's in the code, it's a lot easier. And if you're having him, but I think what I heard Sheila saying was speaking to just best management practices. If it's in the code and we have latitude in the code, then obviously we want to say, I understand why you want to use somebody to come in and say, there's a reason why we want it over here where the code says. I'm just saying, like, if you have something that's not in the code and we're just saying it's a best management practice, the board has less authority to make the developer do that. It's
Yeah.
very different when it's within the code. I
Well,
misunderstood.
the gray areas, because I think that's where this watershed delineation came in. Is you noticed that it was old. You said we talked to experts. They said it's not good to use something that's old. The planning board said, we don't care if it's old. We
Yeah, I
want
got
to
it.
use it. And so she brought in someone that said, and the code was silent on that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
But
that's
the-
the problem. We need to get accurate information, and at the end of the day, what we say is really, you need the credentials for them to be to be also committed to a hearing. You need to have somebody's expert witness, and some of the times they just mentioned that this is a great opportunity. So would this be a budget item for the EAC, or since it really is a consultant for the Board of Supervisors, but they would be working with EAC, is it something that outside of our budget, would you say? Or is it still up for grabs?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
So, but I think if you're asking that request, you go to them and ask that request.
Okay.
And then show them the value of it.
Right.
And the question that I have is, might it not even be something if it's truly, if it's tied to our ordinance, right? And they stick to what our ordinance is.
Right.
It may be just like using the arborist and the land developer actually pays for it. And so that's the only thing I don't know. I mean, and I have to talk to Rich on that. So I mean, I hear what you're asking.
Right.
I mean, it's a little different than what I thought what you were first asking, but if what I hear you're asking is tied back to the ordinance, then I do think that there's potential that it's just like any consultant that we use to fulfill our getting the knowledge that we need to make sure we move something through.
Well, I guess because the township has its regulations and you have the state and your local municipality issues, but like in examples where we've had people who've asked for exceptions. And although, you know, it's not within our codes that the board, the zoning or planning has entertained those exceptions without asking anything. And so it's something that we were saying, we need.
Are we talking when it's a special exception?
We're talking
Like,
whenever there's a concern for the
Yeah,
environment.
I
no, I
Steve, I don't know that we can parse it down.
Yeah.
well, and I'm trying, and I guess here's what I'm trying to say. I think that it, because you got to understand, we're gonna present this to the board, right? I'm gonna have you
Right.
present to the board what you're asking for. And I'm trying to set it up in such a way that you potentially can get what you're looking for, you know, in what you're wanting. I think that if you can show how, if the consultant's focus is saying that the township's ordinance says that, and I'm going to use steep slopes as an example, that steep slopes can only be disturbed 5%, or very steep slopes can only be disturbed 5%. When we give a variance to that, there's an impact on the environment, and here's what that impact is. That's bringing in a consultant that's very specific to then what the developer is asking that's over. It would be if the consultant came back and said there should be zero impact to steep slopes, even though our ordinance says that there's 5% allowed, I don't think the board's gonna be interested, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because we've already said that we allow 5. Now, maybe we shouldn't allow any. I mean, that's
That
a
would
whole
be
different
ideal.
story. But then that's a change to our ordinance,
Yes.
not a change for the developer to deal with.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that's,
Well, if you go to this steep slope example,
yep,
it is a travesty that what the guy on Phillips Lane is asking for and what he's probably gonna get. And, you know, we can talk till we're blue in the face that the code, the code says this is the limit, and yet the planning board's willing to go over that. And instead of us saying 10 times that that's a horrible thing to do, what if we brought in an outside expert that says, that's a horrible thing to do,
Yeah.
and there's a reason that your code says that, and it would be best to stick with your code and not grant the exception.
Sometimes they don't even need to come in, they provide you with a letter.
Would that be,
yeah, I think that as long as it also still understand, and
Yes.
I mean, like
Yeah.
this one's one of those. I personally think that the amount being asked for is excessive. I do think it has to have something over what we allow. And I know that's probably not on the environmental side, what you would want to
Right,
hear.
we're saying 5 to 7 to 8 to 9, 9
Yeah.
starts pushing it,
Yeah.
but we're talking 33.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah,
it's-
like what I'm saying is, obviously the land. I would say today, we would never allow that lot to exist.
Yes,
The facts that lot exists, we now have to work within the parameters that we have, and we
Yes.
have to allow him, the landowner, to be able to do something with that lot.
but what I'm
But-
saying is, would there be value to that dialogue and
I
decision-making
think if the
process?
person came at it from a standpoint of saying, one, looking at it, we think that the piece could be developed with, but if you place the property this way and you could keep it to this, you now are only impacting 10% of very steep slopes and 30% of steep slopes. That I think has great value.
right. and-
Just to say, no, you shouldn't do it,
Right.
would probably not have as
We
great a
said in
value.
that
Does that make
particular
sense?
In that particular example, we even said to them, reduce the footprint and go up with an elevator.
Yeah.
It costs them more, so they don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But we spoke with these experts, and what I'm saying is, a lot of times, what I've been told is, sometimes there's a group of experts, and they'll only charge you like $500. They'll write the letter, they'll verify it, because they understand that we individuals don't have the credentials to speak
Yeah.
on that path. And it was sometimes, and we recognize too that we're not trying to go against what the engineer is, because they do a great job for the township, but they have to adhere to the laws that are.
Sure.
whereas we're looking at what's the best.
As long as the expert is understanding that the goal
Yes,
it still has to meet within what the township's requirement.
absolutely. Yeah, he can't just say no
But
development.
I understand, if you're asking for something different than that, then I think so one, I think could be charged back to the developer
Okay,
for helping the township. The other, I think, would, if you're asking the township to examine its ordinance, I think that would be a different story, and that would
yeah,
be
and
a township.
we're not, our goal is to work with the township. We also don't want to put you in a bad light for a situation. What we're trying to say is that when we need an expert witness, because I'll give you an example, somebody on planning commission and somebody on zoning said to me, I wish you could just say this, this, and this. And you can't, because like you said, there's engineering, the math can always hold. If the math holds, that's great, but it doesn't mean it's the best design. But if the math works in an engineering project, then that engineer can bless it. And
Yeah.
so that's where other people don't understand there's that difference. And what we were trying to say, it's nice to have an expert who can give testimony to that or give
Yeah.
information. So
I think, I
it's-
hear what you're saying, and I think,
yeah.
I think we can get, I think there's a benefit, and I
Perfect.
think
All
we can.
right, so
move
we
in that
can
direction.
throw that in and we can discuss it too. I think though the motion was made by Sheila O'Sullivan Feeney for us to consider adding a consultant to get expert witness and testimony when we need it to be supportive of our environmental initiatives. Yeah, and reinforce the thing, and not in any way to be contentious, but to work what's the best for our Newtown Township community, seconded by Cindy Mahalo. Cindy Mahalo, all in favor, say
I,
aye. All right, awesome. All right, Any other numbers?
Yeah.
Yes.
On the budget, in the interest of signage, we had talked about, I had raised the issue earlier in the year of tree identification signage in park. Help educate residents about biodiversity, pollinators, the role of trees in stormwater management, and encouraging people to look at those trees and think about planting them on private property. And George was in favor of that, but it didn't go anywhere due to priorities or whatever. Is it worth putting some money in the budget about that? The original thought was to get like a $500 mini grant. But that's really not going to go very far.
Yeah, it doesn't go very far when you're looking at that kind of signage, but yeah.
We also talked last month about signs for the supermarkets. And instead of us creating something with the township logo, just to have bring your own bags, they are available online and we could, that is built into our signs and flyer fee. So that would be covered. So Cindy, do you want to have that? Is that, you said for Greer Park, do you want to have that as a separate item?
Gable.
Okay, oh, you meant Gable, okay.
Yeah, in the interest of not having so many little individual items, I know Janet had mentioned last week about more signage, and so I'm just saying maybe we expand this $600 for signs and flyers, up that number, and think that it's going to include like BYO bag signs
Okay.
in shopping areas, the tree identification.
Well, the supervisor's going to want to know exactly, so we have to.
Right,
Yeah.
so we'll
Yeah.
give a
But you
breakdown.
can do it all on one sheet.
Yeah.
You can say it's,
Identification. be on
Well,
there too.
maybe we put stream identification in there, although that's a big chunk, but it's.
I would even be okay with that one on the same page.
No, I
Like, I
think,
mean,
I think.
on the same budget
Oh.
sheet. I'm trying to not make you, I mean,
It's
they're
all
all,
signs.
I would say the stream would be separate, and I'll tell you why, because that's we're committing to a program, and I think they're gonna really want to hear about that. So that's a really important program
Okay.
that you keep. The other ones we can group together, like you said, the bags, and we can list those down.
Yeah.
So George and I had a conversation with George about signage because I was curious what it would cost. And so I brought it up what we're talking about.
The stream.
Streams crossing, right. And he said, oh my goodness, we were just talking about that same kind of thing. So that it's already in the mindset that.
Right.
yeah,
this
we've been
stuff-
talking about it.
Yep. And having the township logo on it, really professional, I think that's great. So I think what we'll look is we will send out the final numbers for our budget consideration. I will be meeting with Steve Neese next week, and Cindy and you can chat with you tomorrow and make sure we're on the same page with everything. But I think nothing, anything new to consider. Is there anything in the budget that we have before we can vote on it next month because for
What
the
is
official?
What is the 450 community education?
That was a fund that if we needed supplies, materials, or anything under community education, sometimes that was a standing item. That's why I asked Mara what we spent for any of these programs and give me the funding.
Okay, that just seemed a little vague. to
Yes.
me. And then,
So
I know-
streets will totally be off of us.
right. And. Okay. No
All
more
right,
questions.
perfect. All right. So we'll discuss with that. So we won't vote on our final budget till next month since we're changing these things. But I think we're gonna probably be landing with the consulting fee about 9,600 then. We might tweak a couple numbers and we'll work with you, Steve, to make sure that we fall within your restrictions, because I know you have a pretty big budget items for Greer Park and a couple other things next year, so we will not be overtaxing. All right, item number 9.4, discussion to select articles for the August EAC newsletter. First of all, I want to let everyone know that Linda Rooney got back to us from the magazine and said that the EAC has done a phenomenal job with the information that is out there. That she says that she's so appreciative of everything that she's gets great response. We are one of the highest response for items targeted, and she appreciates that we're always trying to get the communication and the information out there. It's right. So for our August newsletter, we are going to share, Cindy, we talked about that stream restoration program. I actually sent it to 17 Phillips Lane today myself, for them to take advantage of that program. But no, I sent it to the neighbor who was concerned about, it's a stream restoration program through Penn State. We'll include that in our e-newsletter.
I've signed up for that, by the way, and
Awesome.
I purchased the paper copy of it because I thought that was something we could take
Perfect.
to wherever event that we're.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Joe, do you want to do August or September for your next article?
When's August due?
August will be due on August 9th, Friday, 8 a.m. You want to do August or September? You can think on that, buddy.
Yeah.
You let me know. Relevant articles, Cindy.
I had a thought, it was kind of inspired by the fashion thing,
Yes.
not about plants. And I was thinking, when I had kids, back to school shopping in September just meant so much buying and buying and buying. It's like ridiculous. I don't know what it's like now, but it's these folders,
Art
these
stuff.
notebooks, these
Yes.
pencils. And then you get to the end of the year and half the stuff was never used. So maybe Joe should write this article because he's got kids, but I was just wondering.
Back to school supplies? That's an
Yeah.
awesome. That's awesome.
And I don't know exactly what you would say or how you would say
You and I
that,
can
but
go through that one.
you know, it's such a
It's
big,
an interesting.
Yeah, sustainability and back to school. I think we
Because
can
they
talk about,
provide you with a list of
List,
stuff.
yeah,
that
I
right.
know,
need
and you
get.
have to
Right.
get the stuff.
but you can make
I mean,
conscious
aside from
choices. Okay,
the clothes and all that other.
Yeah,
Okay.
and all the
Just-
clothes.
you and I will talk, Joe, and that'll be the article.
But I
That
was
is
trying to
awesome.
think of something really timely.
Yeah, I think we can talk about it. It's basically still doing the list, but doing it in sustainable making conscious choices instead of, plastic. Can you use cotton? All of these options.
I don't know what options you would have, or maybe, lunches, more sustainable lunch box. Maybe kids always buy at the school or they carry stuff. I don't know.
All right,
Yeah,
awesome.
Just
Sustainable.
like something school
Yes.
oriented.
All right, that's great. Okay, I can look to do, I think it's important that fall planting time to make people aware of invasives to start the fall planting. So I figured I would do that. And
From
making-
what perspective? Trees or
looking at for
perennials?
trees, bushes, just being aware that, what you select. Fall planting is a great time to do it, make
Yeah.
you aware of it, but also being conscious of your decisions instead of saying, oh, I love that pretty color, crepe myrtle, doing
So-
it in an idea of fall planting and being selective. Since you have the time that you're on the beach in August, you can
And
be more
you-
mindful of your choices.
You know what might tie in with that is Penn State has its annual native plant, shrub and tree sale, which again, I don't know if Steve would say this is not acceptable. Penn State Master Watershed Stewards have an annual native plant sale, tree and shrubs
Uh-huh.
that are, very affordable and they're
Sure.
all native plants. Is that something we could link to? Is that okay to?
I mean, I'd want to run it by the board, but I would think that Penn State's a quasi-governmental functioning unit. I mean,
Yeah, Penn State Extension
and
programs.
they're doing it really at cost. They're not trying to make money
Yeah.
on it. So it's not a for-profit type of
Right.
organization,
Yeah.
I think, which is probably okay.
So in your article, you might include that as a link or resource if you're directing people to consider native plants.
Okay.
This might be a source where they could consider getting them.
All right.
But there are also resources on Birdtown, PA about native plants that we could link.
Sure. Do you want to take a different angle on this, or do you want to,
No,
No, not
Yeah,
necessarily,
okay.
but you know, anytime we can get anybody to click on.
Right. You know what, I think, you know, do you want to do something on birds in August, you know, how in the fall?
Well, we have
It's
fall
August.
migration coming up.
Okay, then you want to
Okay.
highlight that coming up or,
When does fall migration
and
start?
when is the bird hike?
It's in September. That one has not yet been scheduled.
If you get that bird hike, that would be
Right.
great.
I think World Global Bird Day is probably first Saturday in October.
Thinking of birds and fall migration, do we want to talk again about lighting? Nighttime lighting and bird strikes?
We
And
could,
would that be for the August or September?
We can do that for September, I think that would probably be
September,
better.
would that
Yeah.
be better?
either,
Yep.
I think.
Well,
Right,
this
okay.
one in August is
September.
still, remember, August is
September,
still,
that's better, but it comes out what?
this
dates
will
does it come
drop
out?
the August, the 12th, 13th, and still, we're talking high heat. Do you want to do like things like ways that you can help wildlife during, to deal with the heat? Because August is still a very hot month. Anything
Not
else?
A lot comes to my mind.
Okay, because like what I do is I put ice cubes in my bird feeders and I make sure that my bird feeders, you know, are, that they are, even though they have plants, to make sure they're well sourced, that they have a variety of proteins and fats in
If you're
them.
using native plants, they have deep
They-
roots
Yes.
and they don't require as much watering.
No, I'm talking my birds.
Oh,
Ice
All right,
cubes for my bird baths. But I mean, things of that nature. What other articles would you be interested? You want to think about that for August?
Wait, did you want me to write up something for the Wilistown Conservation Trust that we just
Yep.
had? Right.
By the way, I thought Dave's article was very nice.
Wasn't that awesome?
I've been meaning to
Right.
send him
I don't know if you saw, it was the red, white and blue, red or blue being united. What I thought was really important, that message, about unity in terms of environment was a really, relevant message, especially in the world that we're living in today. All right, anything, Cindy, you want to contribute or think about? No worries. Okay, that's August. There you go. Update on possible action reporting sustainable Newtown Square green business. We are looking to have our host secured. I did do one ask and I'm waiting to get a response from them. But we're looking to target March of 2025. So just keep that in your calendars. And I want that date locked down soon and I want the venue locked down soon. So hopefully I'll have some answers by August meeting. And Steve, anything on the wetlands ordinance or the lawn conversion? Okay, you will let us
Not
know.
on there because there's no update.
Okay, item number 10.2, updates on Birdtown.
All right, so I'd like to bring up the clutch meeting that we had. This is the for Birdtown. We've clutched together the Birdtown leaders in the Delaware and Chester counties. And we had a presentation at our Vice President, Phil Whitmer, who lives in Tredyffrin Township. He has turned his backyard into an oasis for wildlife with native plants. And we brought up the issue of bird collisions on glass. We have now purchased, Birdtown has, several of these banners that are 6 feet by 3 feet, which talk about the problem with bird collisions on glass. I've talked to Arlene about displaying this banner in the library.
Awesome.
So we're also looking to put together the ways that windows can be seen by birds, because they can pass through something that's it's more than 2 by 2. So there are feather-friendly dots that you
Yes.
can put on the windows. There are also accordion strings that you can hang in front of your windows. And one of our Birdtown leaders also has a white pen that she just puts dots on the window. So if we show these options to people and talk to them about how many of our birds actually strike our windows, they're more the residential window than the higher up windows.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a topic that I'm hoping that we will bring into the township and perhaps even a presentation to our Board of Supervisors.
Awesome. All right. And item shade tree and EAC's Fall Street Tree Giveaway Program. Cindy, you want to give any more updates with since our last meeting?
I had developed some materials, passed them on to Trish. She edited them and passed them on to you, and I've heard nothing since then.
And I do know that after our meeting with Trish and Carol and you and I, the shade tree did meet and they're deciding to do a larger tree. We were a little, Cindy and I were concerned only because of the failure rate for the larger tree, but we respect the right that they are the ones choosing the tree, so we'll be supportive of the program. But if by chance, we could go to 100 trees, at the smaller scale, I think all of us, think that would be helpful for our MS4 credit, but we'll respect whatever they decide and work with them. And we're in full support of that program.
So Steve, are the documents with you? I mean, what's the next step? I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing at this point.
I don't know that there's, I mean, the documents are at the township. I know they're being looked at. I think the
Okay.
thing we're trying to figure out right now is the mailing list. And then that would take the next step. So
Okay.
I've spoken with 6 neighbors and I have 6 trees already interested in being
Okay.
planted in that area. So we're gonna continue on that. That's awesome. Before we go to public comment, if there is anything, a couple things just for business. I want to let everyone know that our EAC agenda items will be due by Saturday, August 2nd at 8 a.m. because we had to move up our timelines a little bit for tomorrow to make sure that happens. Our next meeting will be on Thursday, August 15th.
I'm sorry, that's Saturday, August 2nd?
Yes, I'm
To you or tomorrow?
me, to
Okay.
me. And then I gotta get to tomorrow by Sunday night. And then our next EAC articles will be due Friday, August 9th by 8 a.m. And another thing, if you've had a chance, and this especially to our residents at home, to get to visit Newtown Township's rain gardens outside of the library building here and at the baseball fields, the rain gardens look magnificent. I just stopped there before. The birds, there was golden finches in there, butterflies, bees. It was just a fabulous rain garden in its full glory and bloom today. So we can encourage residents to stop by. And I think since they're seeing no public comment, anything else, Janet?
No, nothing.
Cindy? No, we are adjourned.